Welcome to another Mike Reads Reviews. And like I promised earlier, tonight we're going to be reviewing Thomas Sowell's Charter Schools and Their Enemies. This is a book that was released just this year, in fact, just a few months ago. And I think that the topic is kind of relevant. And because it's so new, I thought this would be a great read to get into. So before I actually get into the review, I want to talk about why I actually bought this book and decided to endeavor into reading it and turning around a review as quickly as I did. And that is because this is a topic that interests me tremendously. Public education, K through 12 education, what works and what doesn't work inside and out of the classroom. On my other channel, Captain Phoenix channel, I'll link to a video that I produced for that channel that goes into great detail about the truth about public education and about spending in public education and what works and what doesn't. So check that video out. I think you'll find it incredibly informative. Dozens and dozens and dozens of sources cited for that. And it's extremely, I think it was fairly well produced. I'm really proud I was able to do in that video, but check that one out. And I think it's really going to inform why I was interested in getting this book in the first place. So like we always do on this channel, we're going to do a quick review of what it is, and then we're going to do the actual review. This, to me, is a book that is very much unlike a lot of Sowell's earlier works. Thomas Sowell is 90 years old, and he was still able to put together an extremely cogent, original research report, is how this kind of reads. And I'll tell you, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Chapter 2, I'm going to bring up the table of contents so I can tell you just how long Chapter 2 is. Chapter 2 is 44 pages long, and none of the rest of these chapters are more than 20 or 25 pages long. And the reason that's the case, and I don't know how well this is going to show up in the stream, is because he compiles a ton of data, and he presents it in the chapter itself. So there are these, a ton of these charts that are worked into the chapter itself. I love this. I love that this is like basically an original research study. It isn't creating its own original source material, but it's taking all of these raw data and concatenating them into a single body of work with a ton of variable control. The chapter 1 is, for all intents and purposes, the introduction to the research. It would be your introduction, background, your purpose statement, which would be found in this type of chapter. Chapter 2 begins with basically the methods section of the scientific method, and then goes into the actual research itself, and then by the end of it is reporting the results. Chapter 3 basically begins what is the entire rest of the book, and the entire rest of the book, at 132 pages long, is the conclusions. So we have basically a book that is the scientific method. And it's a bit of a departure from what Thomas Sowell normally does, which is let me take as an example of economic facts and fallacies, which we're reading as we speak, as a parallel read with Henry Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson. This reads as a rebuttal book. It is a series of economic fallacies, and then presenting facts as to why those are fallacies. So it sounds like this is a counter argument, and a lot of his books are that, presenting raw data and explaining why the commonly held conception is a misconception in many cases, and getting through the economic study. The hyperbolic extreme of this is Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics, which I did a review on earlier. I'll link to that in this video's description as well. And that book reads as, I think, Thomas Sowell's attempt at a textbook. I don't think he succeeds in creating a textbook itself. As good as Basic Economics is, it doesn't read as well, as much like a textbook as he wants. I don't think he's ever done, from all of the books I've read, and I've read an awful lot of Thomas Sowell, I don't think he's ever really done anything like this. And the departure to me is dry. It's really dry, and that I love it. I absolutely love it. So interestingly, this this book made me actually think higher of other works that he did, particularly Discrimination and Disparities. I can't put my finger on why that is, so I'll have to go back and do like a re-review of Discrimination and Disparities, which I read on this channel. I guess we'll go ahead and put the link to that in this video's description as well. So as far as what it is, again, it's tough for me to put into words because it just doesn't read like any other of Thomas Sowell's works. And for him to have gone through the effort of doing this basically original research at 90 shows he still has his wits about him. And that just blows my mind. So this is a book that we're going to get into the review now that I'm definitely going to recommend. If you're in any way interested in the reality of what works and what doesn't work inside the classroom, even if we're not specifically talking about charter schools, this is a must-have. This is an absolute must-have. Now, I will make the point that the book, and this is kind of back to what it is versus the review, it focuses in on a very hyper-specific topic and a very hyper-specific, I won't say fallacy, but there's a topic here that's incredibly, almost esoteric in how specific it is. And that's fine. We've read other books on this channel that seek to tackle a very specific topic. In fact, Thomas Sowell's, what was the short one that we read for him? Trickle Down Theory. The book was Trickle Down Theory and Tax Cuts for the Rich, in scare quotes. And that tackled a very hyper-specific issue and did it from a mostly philosophical take. So he presents mostly the Austrian school and then presents the Chicago school as a smattering throughout. Interestingly, and this is another part of the another aspect of the book that I really like, because he's presenting so much raw data. Here, let me show you the breakdown of how this book works out. So I got to take the jacket off so I can actually hold this thing in my hand. This is the actual content of the book. This is his sources. Do you see how thick this is? There are hundreds and hundreds of pages of either citations to raw data or citations to previous research or just texts in general that he cites as sources. And I'm not saying that the number of citations is, to me, a goal to strive for, but I think that it's a good indicator of a book that I'm really going to like, and a good indicator of how the book is going to read. Speaking of which, the point that it makes is not only extremely well derived, incredibly well substantiated, it's 1,000,000% correct. I've done my own personal research outside of what Thomas Sowell's done, and man, the case that he makes is absolutely brilliant. And one of the points that he brings up, which is a point that he brings up throughout the book, and it's kind of an overarching theme of the book, is something that he discusses on the penultimate page here. And I'll just read one paragraph from it because I think it really sums up the overarching theme and message of this book, which goes beyond just the raw data of the topic in general, of the topic in specific. Perhaps the most important of these general principles is that schools exist for the education of the children. Schools do not exist to provide ironclad jobs for teachers, billions of dollars in union dues for teachers' unions, monopolies for educational bureaucracies, a guaranteed market for teacher college degrees, or a captive audience for indoctrinators. Those who want to see quality education remain available to youngsters in low-income minority neighborhoods must raise the question again and again, when various policies and practices are proposed, how is this going to affect the education of the children? A surprisingly large proportion of policies and practices cannot answer that question. So he's not even saying that they do not answer that question, or that they do not answer that question in the affirmative, or that they can't answer that question in the affirmative. But this is a very important question to ask, and you're just not seeing it in common parlance. And this is a topic I brought up in that video that I told you that I spoke about earlier, that I did about the truth about public spending in public schools, what works and what doesn't work inside the classroom. And that is that these type of questions are questions that don't even get raised. And then when you do raise them, you wind up with the conclusions that Thomas Sowell basically presents, and the data and results that Thomas Sowell basically presents. And by the way, when he does this research, he does an excellent job of independent variable control. Excellent job of that. Better than I've seen in many other works. I haven't seen much of his. There are other works that I haven't read by Thomas Sowell, so I haven't seen him do a work quite like this in terms of its theme and its intended purpose. So I don't know how his independent variable control has manifested itself in, say, previous research projects like this. But in this book, he does an excellent job, an excellent job of independent variable control, to the point where basically by presenting the raw data as results, you come to the conclusion, which I'm not going to reveal, of course, on your own, and it's painfully obvious. So again, the short version, it's not well, let's go to the read itself. The whole read is 130 pages. A lot of it is just these charts, which you can blow through really easily. So this is an extremely condensed read, and I love it. He gets to the point. He sticks to the point. Absolutely love that fact. As far as the actual print itself, whoever made the jacket keeps falling off. So I don't know if there's any other way to find the hardcover version, either with like with like the jacket no longer being a proper jacket, but maybe like embroidered or embossed into the actual cover. But this jacket's terrible. And the font and the rest of the book otherwise is a very ergonomic read. The font is excellent size. Could be a little bit bolder, I suppose, if it was going to stand out better. And the way he presents the chapters and breaks that down is extremely ergonomic. I think there's 7 chapters. And like I said, and one of them's like almost 50 pages long, 44 pages long, as we mentioned before. So very easy read, very accessible read. I don't know how I could be hyperbolic in my recommendation. This, to me, for anyone who's interested in anything even related to this topic, is a must read. And it's extremely well done at that. So Idiocracy, for me, is a movie that's a must see, but I wouldn't call it the Shawshank Redemption or the Godfather in terms of its overall production quality. But this is that. This is not only a must read, it's extremely well done. So I think that he could have said some things a little bit more directly and less circuitously than he could have when in his conclusions, which I don't know if that's necessarily the goal with a book like this, but I'm going to give this book probably a soft 9 on my scale of 1 to 10. Like I always do, I like to conclude with a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. I've given a lot of his previous books an 8. This is better than a lot of his other works. I'd say the only work for me in retrospect that I'm thinking I might stack up as a better read than Charter Schools and Their Enemies by Thomas Sowell is his Discrimination and Disparities, which again I read on this channel, so go ahead and check that out. Which I may have to revisit that review because after this read and the other book I'm in the middle of, which I'll have to reveal later, I think my perspective on that book has changed a little bit in terms of how I think of it. But yeah, so I'll put a link in this video's description to where I got Thomas Sowell's Charter Schools and Their Enemies. So you guys can go ahead and check that out if you'd like. Again, highly recommended. It's probably a soft 9 out of 10. It's probably more like I'm going to give it a soft 9 out of a 10. And that may change over time as I read more works. And as I probably do a review of this, that may become a very hard 9. So you guys have seen my reviews. You guys have seen how I rate books. So for me, 9 means excellent. It means absolutely superb. So go ahead and check that out. Link is in this video's description. We'll see you in the next one, folks. Good night.